It is a vital part of China's security state. San Francisco has banned it. Facial recognition is at the center of a new debate over civil liberties, and a debate here on Roundtable. And a very warm welcome from me, David Foster. A court case in the UK is challenging the police's use of facial recognition technology. That is, taking pictures of people in public and comparing them with a database of suspects. Is it a vital policing tool or a threat to people's rights and to their privacy?
The UK is dealing with the first legal challenge against automated facial recognition technology used by the police. Last month, Ed Bridges, an office worker from Cardiff, took South Wales Police to court for capturing his image while he was shopping in 2017. Mr. Bridges argues it was an invasion of his privacy. Facial recognition technology has the ability to scan up to 18,000 faces per minute and compare them with existing police photographs. Human rights groups in the UK argue that thousands of innocent people go through sensitive identity checks without their knowledge. In the US, San Francisco became the first city to ban the use of this technology by the police. But it's been reported that China is building the world's most powerful facial recognition system, able to identify any one of its 1.3 billion citizens within 3 seconds. Can police be trusted to use facial recognition responsibly, or is it time for new laws to regulate it?
Let's start talking. With me at the round table we have Ken Marsh, Chairman of London's Police Federation, which represents rank and file police officers. Danny Stevens, who runs a company that uses facial recognition at major events. Also here, Nora Santalu, who works on data protection at Bird & Bird International Law Firm, and Leroy Logan joins us, former London Police Superintendent. We're going to get into the fact that you, Ken, and you, Leroy, both serving or former police officers, are at different points on this argument. You're against it, Leroy, you're pretty much for it. Ken, but Nora, let me ask you first of all, this case of Ed Bridges, the guy in Wales, says he's going out for a sandwich and knows his picture's been taken. Is that spying? Is that stealing somebody's rights, somebody's images?
There are different ways of regulating this. The data protection aspect of this, when the police uses it, they can base it on the law enforcement directive, whereas if the private sector is using it, then they have to comply with the general data protection regulations. The law enforcement is permitted to use it for prevention of terrorism or for security purposes or for public interest reasons.
And could you describe somebody who could possibly in the future, no matter what they've done in the past, commit some kind of misdemeanor, perhaps dropping litter or perhaps inadvertently forgetting to pay for a newspaper in a shop? Could you describe that as being of the public interest and therefore in the police interest and therefore they could use it? Or is that absolutely bonkers?
That could be a little bit of a stretch, perhaps, but it's certainly to do with what the law enforcement intends to do with it. But it seems as though they are also in need of guidance. So this Cardiff case is being heard at the moment. It was heard on the 21st of May. But when the outcome comes, it's certainly proving to us that even the police themselves are looking for guidance from the public bodies and the courts themselves on how they should be applying the law enforcement directive and how they should be using this facial recognition technology and to what extent and what are they permitted to do with it. So
problem is it can go wrong, can't it? Because it also in Wales, I think 2,500, 2,600 cases of which facial recognition technology being used, of which 2,400 were false positives. In other words, they were wrong.
Yes. So that was the case, I believe, in Champions League match, that they were using the facial recognition technology. And facial recognition technology was actually being used by 3 police forces in the UK, and 2 of them ruled it out because it didn't provide enough accuracy for their purposes. And Cardiff Police is still the one that uses it and the one that uses it the most in the UK. But given that they have got more than 90% inaccuracy, then that puts it into question.
Well, so let's come to you, Leroy. Retired now, former police superintendent, high-ranking British police officer. And you think this is right, it is good, it should be used, but it goes wrong, and it goes wrong in a lot of cases.
Well, absolutely. Unfortunately, we're getting a situation where the technology is not being kept up by the legal frameworks. And so there seems to be using loopholes to push these things on. Different force areas are doing it at different rates, and the private sector is using it. And I think there's not sufficient independent oversight. There's no proper community impact assessments, no real wider consultation. And as a result of that, it adds to the mistrust of those communities who already have a lack of trust and confidence in police, because they think, well, you know, we are subject to heavy-handed policing, we don't trust you, and here you have a technology that's going to be making the situation worse. And then we have other algorithms in the gangs matrix that's already been seen to be flawed by Amnesty International, the information commissioners, and various other organizations, Stopwatch, etc. So until they really get these technologies right and not flawed, I'm against it.
So you could be banging up the wrong person, Ken. Not you personally, but I mean, it could be used in the wrong ways.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I'm in the game of keeping people safe, and that's what we should be doing as police and as a police service. And when you look at the tools we're talking about, Leroy's absolutely right. It needs to be correct, and there are flaws in it that need to be ironed out. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But as a starting point, if we take it that we want to use it all the time, could we have stopped the London Bridge Terrorism Act happening? I think we'd have stood half a chance if this was out there then, because we knew who these individuals were, we just weren't following them. You know, we've got to be very clear about what we're talking about, because this is a fantastic piece of kit, but it's got to be right.
Okay, let me stop you there and say that is a little bit like saying using a big dragnet, fishing dragnet,
Absolutely.
to catch one special tuna, but you also round up 25 million other fish, is worth it.
Absolutely. For me, no doubt whatsoever. I have no issue whatsoever. If we could have stopped that atrocity taking place, no problem whatsoever.
There's no proof of that.
No, there's not proof, but if it can be used to detect and be part of our equipment, all for it.
This is where we bring you in, Danny, because you work with it. And do you know about its imperfections?
Well, it's a completely different technology. In terms of facial recognition, you have different aspects. You have the simple one-to-one comparison. You go to the airport, you have your passport, and your passport is verified with the photo on your passport. So that's a one-to-one comparison, very accurate. What we use, we have a consent of delegates in an event. They upload their photo, and we have a database of maybe 10, 20, 50, 100,000 delegates, and we compare a live stream to that database. So it's a contained event with a very high accuracy. You're talking about 90% inaccuracy. We're talking about 99.7% accuracy.
Because yours doesn't have to be as sophisticated.
I would say it's very sophisticated, but the comparison is one person to 10, 20, 50,000 biometrics profiles, and not one to maybe 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, where the accuracy goes down consistently. And they will get it better. For us, a very important element is consent. When you're a delegate and we're trying to deliver an added value in an event, like a better experience, you get in faster, you don't have to wait for barcode scanning, for access control, we can print your badges, we can deliver information of where's your next session. That is adding value for the person attending an event.
Let's throw this back at Ken, because I mean, there's so much to discuss here. Let's throw this back at you. Consent. You know, the bad guys shouldn't have to give their consent, but what about the good guys? You know, what about those out there who think, hang on, you've got no right to take my picture, no right to use my picture.
Everywhere that you go, you are being filmed. And if you think you're not, then you're foolish, because you are.
But that's because in this country we have what they call a CCTV culture.
Absolutely,
Not
they're innocent
necessarily in other
people. You're
countries.
talking about innocent people.
Yeah.
They've done absolutely nothing wrong. They're law-abiding citizens. They are being filmed. They don't queue up in thousands to complain about that. They are all being filmed on a daily basis. So that's the first part of what we're talking about. Then we talk to people who have committed a crime. Surely it must be better for us to have the ability to track that person very quickly and understand what they've done, where they are, and how we can deal with them and apprehend them. all for it, 100%.
Okay, Nora, I'll come to you in a minute,
Yeah,
Lira, if I may, but Nora, what are the civil liberties issues here?
So the civil liberties issues is that generally, if you're collecting this kind of data, this is sensitive personal data. The sensitive personal data could be the data that is about a person's race, it could be about person's ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation. And this kind of data can be used to discriminate against individuals. That's why when you're using this data, you have to be extra careful about the purposes, and it has to be absolutely necessary to use this data. Otherwise, you shouldn't be using it, because if it is processed in the wrong hands or if there's access by the wrong people, then it could have...
But what Ken talks about here is a form of surveillance. Is there an issue there?
Well, there may be an issue there about people's liberties. So they may feel like when they're in public that they cannot act freely, and they have to be acting in a certain way so that they do not get flagged up in the law enforcement systems. So we have seen this in when people use social media, for example. They don't want to have their full name exposed, so they would change their surnames, for example, so they wouldn't be able to be fined by, for example, their future prospective employers. So we see that people start to feel uncomfortable with being under this.
Nothing wrong with being uncomfortable if you're safe. That's Ken's argument.
Well, that's a balancing exercise. So is it worth taking away people's liberties for the sake of providing them with safety? So I think that is something that should be taken into account.
That is the big argument, Leroy. I know you wanted to say something first, but that is the point, isn't it? If you take away some civil liberties, but you pretty much guarantee that they're going to be living in a safer world. But say what you wanted to say first.
Well, to be quite honest, I don't mind having greater technology to assist in making us more safe and secure. My issue is around consent. And that's one of the arguments that San Francisco was discussing. And in the end, they scrapped facial recognition because they are seeing it's more of a problem than an assistance. And then
A problem in what way?
The way in which it erodes trust and confidence, especially for communities who believe they're on the sharper end of law enforcement and they don't see that the police is for them. There's a lot of people over here. I've been running a youth program for the last 18 years called Voyage Youth. And those young people believe they're over-policed and under-protected. And all of a sudden, and that's through stop and search and Section 60 roadblocks, etc. And then all of a sudden, you're now going to bring in facial recognition. They've seen the gangs matrix being a false positive. Then you want to bring in facial recognition. And then they hear that thousands of people's identity and information is on a database that the police have access to when they haven't done anything wrong, they have never been convicted or charged of anything, and then you're being scanned without consent. Now, for me, we need to have civil liberties primarily in our minds. As Nora said, it has to be proportionate, it has to be necessary, and more importantly, it has to be accountable. And it's the accountability that gives me some real causes for concern.
So what do you think is going to happen in the wider picture, in this country, because that's where we're seeing so much of it being used? What do you think is going to happen?
I think what normally happens now, organisations, the government has to be taken to court for them to sit up, and the Wales case is going to be a real defining moment. And I think it's also about people coming together and saying, listen, this is not right. I know there's petitions on this, and it has to be debated in Parliament. I think Parliament really needs to get its act together and bring in the legal frameworks to ensure that it can be used properly in the public sector, in the private sector, and to ensure that everyone sees the benefit of it. But the San Francisco experience gives a lot of people doubt.
Danny, say whatever you would like to say in response to what you've heard, but I've got a couple of questions for you in a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Shall I start?
Yep.
Okay, your website links you to something that is a lot bigger, that talks about the potential of facial recognition at such events. I'm going to read some of it here. It talks about a watch list. There are publicly available records which include the most wanted criminals. If the event host is aware of known troublemakers, it's possible to add them to the watch list. Their watch lists frequently associated with people to be kept out of the venue. We refer to them as blacklists. There is also the idea that there are hotspots. In other words, you can work out where people are going and perhaps work out algorithmically whether they're actually going to be buyers or whatever. So it's not just used to get them into the venue securely. There are other reasons for it as well. Creeping technology.
I think there's a big difference in what the technology can do technically and what is ethically allowed. And there's a big difference. And if it's to track troubleshooters or troublemakers at a football game, whatever, these are known individuals, and then I'm very much in favor to track those and keep an eye out of those. But like having everybody in the database and tracking everybody's behavior within an event, that's just one bridge too far.
But that is what is suggested in this website, tracking everybody's behavior by where they go, what they do, who they talk to.
But this is for data collecting. So as an organizer, you have interest to know, and I'm talking about a trade show, which booths have been visited, who has seen which exhibitor, to know how the crowd moves in an event, or even in a festival to move where's the...
But you're tracking people's behavior, which is what you say you might have a problem with.
With a consent. With a consent.
This is the problem, Ken. Let me throw this one in there. The problem is, as Danny said, it's about what you can do technically and about ethics. And it comes back to who's in charge of using this information. Yeah, you're an honest man. I know you, Ken. We've met on a number of occasions. But I don't know who's going to be following you. Who's going to be...
Absolutely.
What about in China? I mean, you just don't know.
Absolutely, but we've got to put this again into context. That's the private sector you're talking about with a lot of what we're discussing here. We are the police, which are government-controlled and there to protect the public. And I find it quite strange because we're sitting here talking about recognition and cameras and everything else, but I've just given you some examples. Add to that, all my cops in London in uniform wear cameras. They film every individual that they interact with. Most of them haven't done anything wrong whatsoever.
But let me point this
Hold
one
on,
out.
there's
No,
no
no,
complaints ever about that.
All right,
No
let me point this
complaints.
one out. Okay, policeman has a camera.
Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. In case there's an incident, then
Yeah.
you can use it as evidence.
Yeah.
But that camera, if it is linked to facial recognition technology, becomes a different tool.
But why? That's the point of what we're talking about. Because if it apprehends
Because it's
someone,
like taking fingerprints. It's like taking
no,
DNA.
it's not. This is the whole point of it, because who comes and complains? And we're talking about Wales, and we're talking about a couple of isolated areas, which I'm sure will be dealt with and recognised correctly. And I go along with Leroy that the government needs to look at this more carefully and get it right, because that's what it's all about. We are only acting on behalf of, so we want it correct. We want it all in place so that it's right. But as a piece of equipment, it is fantastic.
Okay, but this is the difference, isn't it? I mean, there's a massive... you take somebody's picture, fine, you can use that as evidence if some wrongdoing is committed. But if you link that picture to perhaps a database of people's faces to say, is this person a suspect in something, that is something entirely different, isn't it?
There is also the mass effect of it as well. So it's not one single individual that is at the point of the camera that the policeman is directed at. It's to do with hundreds of thousands of people that can be in one space, and every single individual's face is being identified. So perhaps 99.9% of those individuals didn't have anything to do with police, or they weren't involved in anything, but still that data is going to be linked and perhaps matched with someone either wrongly or for any other reason. So that is the kind of environment that you could see in an authoritarian regime almost. It's not right to say that if you don't have anything to hide, then you shouldn't do anything. It's more to do with the...
Will there come a time, what are we, 6 billion people on this planet now? Do you think there'll come a time when pretty much everybody's face is held on file somewhere? And they'll be able to spot instantly who you are if you commit a traffic offence or if you mug somebody or whoever?
Well, it will come to government's choices. So if it's again to do with cultural aspect of it as well.
But
so
data is the new weapon. I think we've discussed that on this programme many, many times, and we're talking about using it for nefarious purposes. You say it depends on the government. It doesn't necessarily. It could depend on who else gets hold of this and who uses it for whatever ends.
Yes.
Do you think that's possible?
It is entirely...
It may be against the law, but plenty of people break the law.
Well, laws change as well, so it would be to do with the needs of the society. So if in the future there seems to be that there is a need for this technology to develop, then it might happen.
What do you reckon, Leroy? One day we're all going to be there.
You're assuming we're not already there now. I mean, in certain societies, you know, especially in London, we are the CCTV capital of the world. We are being scanned more times than anywhere else in the globe, you know. So I think we're further down. And, you know, it's only when you get these revelations that, oh, they got this data, you know, like MI5 has been found out and it's breaching all sorts of information commissioners' protocols. You know, that's when you find out. So I can't discount that it's already happening. My real concern is it's all around hearts and minds here. It's around perceptions. People's perceptions, especially what their experience is already. This is just another layer of thinking, Big Brother, it's going to be using my identity, but also it can be a default because of inbuilt flaws, the colour of my skin, my gender. You know, I remember hearing from an Oxford Don who said that this technology is mainly based on white males. Now, that's creating already, it was a bit of a farce. They think, gosh, don't they, even when they're developing this technology, they can't even think we've got a diverse society. They can't even think outside the box around that. And then, you know, you've got people who've already been subject to algorithms of one form or another. But you know, one of the things that Ken might want to comment on, you know, this technology, we live with it in all aspects of life. In a lot of ways, it de-skills us as human beings. You know, you go on a tube or a bus, no one talks to each other or anything like that. Their heads are in the phone.
Yeah, but that's got nothing to do with this.
No.
That's your view of the modern world.
No, but I'm
so
saying...
what, if you've got a question for Ken?
I really believe this can de-skills officers, because even when I was dealing with the gangs matrix, there's only one officer out of over 40 officers I dealt with hundreds of suspects, said, actually, that person should be on the matrix.
Yeah, but that's a bit like saying, isn't it, Ken? I don't know whether you agree with this, but my feeling is that's a bit like saying, you know, let's go back to the 19th century when there was the good old copper's nose rather than DNA.
So in answer to that, policing now, from when I joined, when you joined, it's a different world. Completely different world.
Still needs the human touch.
It always will need.
You could put the two
it
together.
will always need the human touch, but there's always the but. We have to get in touch with what's happening now, and now it's technology-based phenomenally. Most crime is done on computers. It's a different world. I don't understand half of it, to be honest with you, but our new cops coming in do understand it, and yeah, it does desanitise. Call it how you want to call it. I don't think it de-skills because it's different.
Because they're reporting officers, not investigating officers.
It's different skills now, though.
It is, Danny, is it not? Unless it comes with consent, it is spying. And we've seen this smart city springing up in China. Let's go to the west of China, to Xinjiang province, where the Uyghurs live, persecuted Uyghurs. They are judged through facial recognition on whether they should get houses, mortgages, jobs, etc., etc., etc. It's a slippery slope.
That's definitely where we don't want this technology to end up, and it's already happening today. And I think there's nothing that can stop it from happening unless it's regulated by law.
Checks and balances.
But
I agree with the fact that
we are so different to China that I don't think you can even put us on the same page. We are the more scrutinised police service in this country than anywhere in the world. We are nothing like China in terms of the way they behave, conduct themselves, and what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. We are just a million miles apart. And,
of course, you're just talking about the police, but there are other people out there as well who could use this unscrupulously. Right, but then that comes back to what Leroy says. The government needs to get control of this. It needs to be written up correctly. And it's not at all at the moment. Let's ask Nora on that one. It's not properly regulated, is that right?
No, it is regulated. Actually, it is regulated on the Law Enforcement Directive and the GDPR. So if you're in the private sector, then you would have to comply with the General Data Protection Regulation.
You mentioned this at the beginning, but is it strong enough?
It's still new. So that's why there's guidance required on this. It says that if you're going to be using this kind of data, then you need to either rely on the individual's consent or you have to have another kind of lawful basis, which could be, as I said before, the public interest or the security of the individuals. So you need to be careful on making a balancing test on whether or not if this is good enough reason to take away people's liberties in that sense. So you have to conduct what we call a data privacy impact assessment. So it's to do with, this is a high risk using of data. because it's sensitive data. So
It's difficult, though, isn't it? You know,
It
'cause
is
you've gotta
very
weigh that. We
difficult.
don't have very much longer.
No, but I
Leroy,
think,
quick.
you know, the thing, even if you got the legal framework right and you plug those loopholes, and it's fit for purpose, there needs to be independent oversight. You know, some of these things you can't just leave to law enforcement agencies or governments.
against
You
that.
need independent experts to say, listen, you're going off track. You're not actually sticking to the reasons for this. And, you know, if we don't have that, we will end up like a China's.
OK, listen, thank you, each and every one of you. A couple of us at this table are old enough to remember a British TV police programme called Police 5, presented by my old friend Shaw Taylor. Caught many a crook that way, and as Shaw used to say, as we say goodbye, keep them peeled. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Thank you.